Well, excellent. All right. Good afternoon, everyone joining us. Those of you on Eastern time, good afternoon to you, and good morning to those of you in our Western time zones. Hopefully at this point, we've all adjusted to the time change from over the weekend, right? My name is Chris Garland. I serve on our community development team here at NCST. And again, so glad you're able to join us for what will certainly be an exciting discussion and presentation. A couple of quick points. We're recording today's session. Following today's presentation, we'll have some time for question and answer. And we encourage you to submit those comments and questions through the Zoom Q&A feature there on your Zoom panel. We'll also be sharing today's presentation following today's call. We will not have a national policy update this month, so we may wrap up a little earlier than usual, but we'll definitely have plenty of time for Q&A following our featured presentation. Speaking of which, we're thrilled to have Mr. Robert J. R.J. McGrail join us for today's Community Impact Briefing. R.J. McGrail is a Senior Research Fellow in the Office of the President at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy in Cambridge, Massachusetts. At the Lincoln Institute, R.J. is a Principal Investigator and Director of a new project, Accelerating Community Investment, ACI, bring new partners to the community investment system. The ACI project will increase the efficacy and impact of philanthropic impact investing portfolios through a combination of field research, convening of leaders in the community investment system, development of potential investment opportunities for mission investors, and collaboration with other Lincoln Institute program areas. Before joining Lincoln Institute in 2019, RJ served as a senior strategy and program executive in senior management roles in both government and in politics. Most recently as the Policy and Program Impact Officer for Mass Development, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Quasi-Public Economic Development Authority. Prior to his role with Mass Development, RJ served in a variety of roles in the gubernatorial administration of Deval L. Patrick, including working directly with the governor as a senior policy advisor on policy and political matters. RJ served as a member of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston's Working Cities Challenge Steering Committee and has been an invited lecturer at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He's also a graduate of the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and also holds an MA in public administration from Suffolk University in Boston. With that, let me welcome RJ McGrail to today's NCST Community Impact Briefing call. RJ, I think you are set to share your screen, so I'll turn the controls over to you.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. And thank you to Chris Tyson and Raquel and Chris and the team at the Trust for reaching out and asking me to join the call today to spend a little bit of time talking about both the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy and then more specifically our work in accelerating community investment, our relatively 2020, I guess, is still relatively new effort designed, as Chris was saying, to make better connection at the intersection between capital and communities with a focus on public finance and public development finance authorities. I'm going to share my screen. So I'd like to first start to talk a little bit about the Lincoln Institute. Lincoln is, oh, sorry.
Looks good.
There we go. Lincoln's a private operating foundation, which in the very, very complicated tax code sense means that we're a foundation that is not a direct grant maker. We are, however, a research and network convener and operator of communities of practice. Lincoln's mission is to improve the quality of life through the effective use, taxation, and stewardship of land. We research and recommend creative approaches to land as a solution to a range of economic, social, and environmental challenges. We accomplish that work in the way that we think about it is as a think and do take. We're not solely a research institution, whether it's through our direct program goals that you see on the screen here, or our various centers that are housed at the Lincoln Institute. We really seek to influence the way in which the public realm informs its decisions, foundationally focused on land value, and land policy. The Institute's founding story is an interesting one that I often think is useful to share with folks. We date to the personal, family, private philanthropy of John Lincoln, the founder of Lincoln Electric Company, which is still a publicly traded, Cleveland headquartered American industrial company. Lincoln Electric, his company, continues to sort of be part of the Lincoln story because of what he came to realize was, through reading the work of Henry George, the American philosopher, the fundamental role that land and land value and land policy plays in a range of ways in which the public conceives of policy solutions for things, the way the public pays for things, and recognizing that it's important when public investment is made in land that the accruing benefit, the resulting benefit of those investments should not be solely to the benefit of landholders, but should be more broadly shared through various community constructs and through community benefit arrangements and vehicles. So here we go. I want to talk a little bit about this accelerating community investment initiative. This is a project that we convened at Lincoln, really starting in 2020. I started at Lincoln in 2019, just before the holidays. And we wanted to examine the fundamental question of, is there an appetite for public finance practitioners? So think housing finance agencies, development finance agencies, infrastructure finance agencies, to connect with, learn more about, and ultimately dig into deeper partnerships with catalytic capital, impact investing, holders of capital that might be motivated by something other than financial return, but who would be also partners in the true investment sense, right? When you think about impact-aligned investing, especially for philanthropies, what we found in our research is that there really is a focus on a double bottom line of both the return. Think about mortgages, right? I'll say something that I know might resonate with a lot of folks here. The underlying public finance structure for the way that many mortgages in this country are capitalized is a bond finance instrument. It's the mortgage revenue bond issued by state, local, or regional housing finance agencies. Those are rated municipal securities. They're part of a $1 trillion muni bond market. But they also represent a tremendous way to, if you're a funder that cares about housing or a funder that recognizes that housing and homeownership is a pathway to economic success, they also represent a mission-aligned opportunity in addition to being a rated investment security. So we've been doing a lot of work in ACI trying to do three things. One is to identify public finance practitioners around the country that we think are interested in pursuing innovative capital-led strategy, grow their skill and knowledge, foundationally focused on land-based finance, figure out ways to connect capital holders and project proponents in communities all around the country through this public finance channel, recognizing that this might be an interesting place for a public finance entity to participate in conversations with the broader civic landscape, either regionally, locally, or nationally, in terms of the funder universe, mission-aligned or mission-minded holders of private capital, et cetera. We're really trying to build an ecosystem. We take an ecosystem approach to the work and are hopeful to, through this initial ACI community of practice, as you'll see here on the screen, kind of deepen knowledge and practice of land-based public finance. So we spent a year with just practitioners without bringing capital holders into the conversation. And the that choice was intentional. It was to say that there's a bunch to learn both from each other and about the best way to present your product, program, or project for potential investment partnership before you talk to a single investor. You know, we engaged in some work around helping our participants identify and do systems analysis and systems mapping to get a better sense of the systems in which they were operating. And then we pivoted in the second half of the first year towards helping our partners develop a pipeline of investable opportunities. Those could be everything from conceptually, we want to have more mortgages for a certain place in our community or a certain population that had a hard time accessing mortgage capital, or it could be we have this loan fund that we want to scale up and we've proven it's successful. I bring that up to say that our work was everything from aspirational to we have a thing that we want to bring more investment into, sort of by design. And we did that in places all around the country where there is more existing capacity and infrastructure around partnership with philanthropic investors, in places who were very aspirational about, God, would love to do more of that so that we could get more capital to do more projects to achieve more impact. So we put together as I said, by design, we put together a table that was really well distributed across a continuum of readiness in terms of being ready to bring investment in, spent some time learning from each other, spent some time skill building, providing sort of technical assistance and coaching and support. Asked our folks, do you have, now that you've sort of gotten a sense of how to tell a better story, how to better attack and frame your opportunity as an investment opportunity plus impact, rather than just an impact opportunity, just thinking about the grant side of a foundation. We wanted folks to think about both grant capital and investment capital together, and to develop a comprehensive community investment lens to the way in which they were approaching their capital raise. We really think that ecosystem building not only builds the practice of public finance, which is important to us at Lincoln, but addresses some of the calls for systemic reform of our financial system, addresses calls from community to have more democratization of finance, and frankly, develops more impactful investment in places all around the country. We feel like if we can do a better job of getting public finance ready to talk to capital, and then help our public finance participant partners develop a series of different levels of readiness, investable opportunities, then we come to the point where we bring capital to the conversation. We've been doing that with some interesting results in different parts of the country that I'll get to in a second here. Want to give a sense of where we have been so far. These are the 11 states in which we launched the community of practice. As you can see, it's big states, small states, it's northern states, southern states, it's states with significant rural challenges, states where the challenges are largely more urban, large city, small to mid-sized city. And that was, again, intentional in our effort to identify public finance leaders, community leaders, and figure out ways that we can have a representative cohort of folks around the country and increase the availability of capital in the right place at the time for the purpose. So we've been at the community of practice for 2 years now. And as you'll see on this slide, we really want to, I think Chris mentioned this in his intro, which was entirely too kind. I appreciate that. Sort of increased impact investing portfolios across asset holder types. We started with bond finance for a couple of reasons. One, it's the one thing that every state in the country gets to do. Treasury allocates private activity bond cap. That's used for infrastructure, economic development, and housing finance all around the country in different ways by different states, but that's the commonality. That's the thing that every housing finance agency or every development finance agency has access to. And different states have different policy decisions about how those resources are allocated or used, but it was the one thing that makes the very diverse in terms of product and program and style of work community investment ecosystem around the country. It was the one thing that we knew everybody did with some level of bond financing. So that's where we started. The reason that I bring that up is to say we very quickly realized that we needed to look across asset classes and not just think about bonds. So we have helped our partners identify strategy to bring in additional debt partners to loan funds, if that's something that's of interest in a place that we're working in. We have helped our partners identify sources for equity capital in real estate deals, if that's a need in a community or a preference or a desire for a community to bring that asset class into the conversation. We really want to do three things. We want to influence and improve public finance, as I said. We want to build community, improve practice, and increase sort of capital flows in place. And we want to capture those lessons. I mean, we are still a research entity. We are still a research and practice think tank in a lot of ways. So we want to increase impact and sort of capture our lessons, share those lessons, and drive systems change. We've been able to have different participants in the ACI community of practice come and present at, for example, the Milken Institute has an annual public finance conference. Because of our partnership with Milken, we've been able to sort of elevate exciting existing practice that folks have had. And we do that through events and talks and publications and things like that. We also have the ability to sort of work through the catalytic capital sort of trade association types. So think Mission Investors Exchange, think the Global Impact Investing Network. We've been able to sort of talk with our philanthropic partners on the capital holding side, with banks on the capital holding side, both national and regional, and then also think through ways that we can sort of develop. Before I get to how we do that, I'd like to leave these up here and stop and see if there are any questions so far around Lincoln. And then my intent for the second half of the time that we have together is to talk a little bit about how we do it, talk a little bit about what's next, and then I'd love to sort of first engage in a conversation with the folks on the call about questions they have about Lincoln, questions they have about ACI, or we spend a lot of time talking with impact capital holders around the country. So I've got some, I don't want to overcommit to storytelling, but I do have some thoughts on sort of the general landscape of how impact capital is looking to get involved in places around the country. A couple of tools that I want to share as well, but I'd like to pause at this point and sort of see if there are baseline Lincoln or ACI questions before we get into how we do it, what's coming next for us, and ways in which we might have a conversation about community investment.
Sure. And thanks so much for that pause, RJ. Certainly, folks, if you have questions, I really would encourage you to use the Q&A feature, be them questions for RJ regarding the past and present of Lincoln Institute or specific to the ACI initiative. We did have one question just confirming that, in fact, we'll make sure that we get this recording made available to all of our registries for this. But hearing none, RJ, I think
absolutely. I'm happy to jump right back in, but I didn't want to. I felt like I had been talking for a while, so I didn't want to.
It's great stuff.
So how do we do this? We have this national community of practice that we committed to doing in the pilot with those initial group of 11 states. We committed to 8 sessions over 2020 and 21. We've completed all of those. So we've had, as I said, we've had a combination starting all this activity in the middle of the pandemic, presented some challenges for Lincoln's traditional model, which is to bring people either to us or to their peers to do this work together. We did the bulk of the first year and a half on Zoom screens, just like this one. But we were able to successfully bring the group together and begin to do some of that teaching and skill building that I described. We spent a lot of time on that skill development piece. And now, as I said, we've pivoted to this pipeline development exercise where we've been able to help participants develop and share community-driven, community-sourced, right? That's a big important thing, talk about lessons that we've surfaced in our research at Lincoln. Impact investors want to hear about authentic community engagement, and they want to hear about authentic community sourcing of priorities. They're less interested in, and this is important work too, but they're less interested in the pro forma. We had a public meeting, we did community engagement, and then a bunch of decision makers made a decision about what we were going to pursue to do as a project in this place or this set of places in our community or in our state. What moves impact capital is the story and the impact and the authentic way in which the projects are sourced from community preference. So we did a lot of work around better storytelling, better community engagement strategies. One companion effort at Lincoln that's something that we do regularly is the Consortium for Scenario Planning, which is a really, really deep, robust community planning, community visioning process that Lincoln hosts. That lessons from that work have been made available to the ACI community of practice. We really view that telling the authentic community story piece of things is very important. But that the notion of how we share community-driven investable opportunities to capital holders is what brings us to something we call the ACI Local Investor Challenge. This is sort of the second phase of the work. Community of practice members, some of them are still working on sort of what they want to work on. Some of them have identified a project, product, or program that they think is either existing already that they want to scale or something new that they want to launch that meets the community need. And in a subset of the places that I showed on that map, so New Orleans, Cincinnati, an effort in Texas that is statewide in its focus, but the event was held in Austin. And then later this spring in Atlanta, we're bringing this local investor challenge, which is sort of the second piece of ACI. There's the community of practice, there's the access to Lincoln tools and knowledge and curriculum and research and coaching. And then there's this sort of connecting to investment capital. I know that there's a lot of folks on the call who probably want to hear about that and how we do that. So what we have said to our participants is when you have near-term investable opportunities, and we define near-term as 6 months to 18 months. So it doesn't need to be ready to go tomorrow, but it should be ready to go within a fiscal year, plus or minus a few months, just from a readiness perspective. And you don't want to bring investors in too late that they don't have a chance to feel agency to increase the likelihood that they'll bring new capital to bear. You also don't want to bring them in too early that you're having a bunch of investor or capital-driven conversations that aren't as reflective of community as they need to be to maximally position the work to attract new investment. So when we do these, when we've done these local investor challenges, we've said, do you have near-term opportunities? If the answer to that question is yes, we move on to the second sort of criteria here, which is, do you have existing local investor, bond purchaser, loan fund participant, sort of existing local capital holders who have participated with you as a public finance entity or a community entity in delivering capital? The reason that we identified that piece of the strategy as vitally important is because every time that we had a conversation through all of the research on the first phase of ACI with foundations, with CRA lenders, with municipal market investment bankers, with anybody who's sort of in the capital side of the equation, from a national perspective, a new entry to a market, amongst the first questions that we would get is, has Topeka gotten local investors to care? Because if they haven't, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to conceive of a way to come in and sort of throw national capital at a problem that local capital isn't at least interested in helping solve as well. So we took that feedback from the capital holder side of the equation to heart and said, okay, do you have near-term opportunities? Yes. Do you have local investor partnerships, interests that you can demonstrate? Can you bring them to the table for a conversation? The answer to that second question is yes. And then we ask the third question, which is if it's yes, if then the third piece of it is, okay, let's collaboratively co-design what we like to describe as a design lab for community investment strategy. So you've got an idea, or you've got a project or a product. You're willing to do three things. Bring your local investors into the conversation. What we at Lincoln will do is come to town, bring our convening power to bear, to bring new curated national, new technical investor partners to town to meet community members, to meet practitioners, and to have Lincoln's not we're a research institution. We're a private operating foundation. We're not a broker dealer. We're not interested in getting in the midst of your due diligence as a project proponent or an investor's due diligence. What we want to do is to say to our participants and partners, if you want to have a conversation with new capital owners where you can benefit from their experience on design, structuring, messaging to improve your eventual product, program, or project, and you're willing to have an initial set of conversations that are really about building the relationships. This is the relationships and experiential driven model in a lot of ways. We found that the easiest way to get to yes with a new investor is to not ask them for a check the first time you talk to them, or the second time you talk to them, or the third or fourth time, even in some cases. There's a long sort of iterative partnership building process that we think builds the best, most potentially strong new investor partnerships. And we convene the space to start that conversation. So when we say to our participants is, let's talk about what you want to do. Let's get smart, experienced, innovative thinkers, leaders in municipal finance, leaders in the municipal bond market, leaders in CRA lending, leaders in philanthropy, to come in and hear you out and meet your community members. And, we always try to get out into the community and get out of the hotel or the conference room to sort of get into community, to really get a sense of place and begin to sort of let our participants benefit from the knowledge and expertise that we're able to bring in to improve what will ultimately, let's be frank, in many cases, be a request to a foundation to be a partner, or be a way to provide a new official statement to a new potential bond investor. But let's do it in a way where it's front loaded on the relationship side rather than on the transactional side. And we have found, as we've been rolling these out, that has been a pretty successful way to approach things. Just wanted to give a sense of the participant types. On the public side, it's the folks that you see on this screen. On the capital holder side, it's exactly the types of folks that I described earlier. I just have this in here to share it. What's ahead? As I said, it was a 2-year commitment to those 11 states. We continue to do research in this field. We have an intention to convene a second community of practice. So this is the brief commercial, and I thank Chris and Raquel and the NCST team for this, to say, if this sounds interesting to you, or you think it might be interesting to your public finance partners, we are always on the lookout for either places to do some research on or places to partner with as we roll out a second round of this community practice. So we'll continue to do that work over the next 6 months or so. We also have identified some challenges, right? There's a significant lack of, and some of these are things that we're definitely doing, that being investor challenges and the whole expand bucket that you see on the screen here. The ACI lab is our accelerator idea. That's something that we're still looking for additional partners on, but that would be to take sort of the more advanced practitioners from the group that you saw on the map earlier and really dig in with them over the next 18 months to close on those initial investor challenge conversations and bring significant new capital into those local ecosystems. we have an idea to use Lincoln's in-house Center for Geospatial Solutions to start to look at a range of activities around geospatial data. That's something that we're conceiving. These enhanced activities are all aspirational for us at Lincoln. I included them on this screen just because I think it's useful. One of the biggest things that we hear from our local partners is the lack of not only in some markets fiscal capacity, but the human capacity to sort of bring these deals together. So we have this idea to do some version of a fellowship program where we might, if we can identify partners, how do I pick some places around the country where there's a need for either additional municipal capacity or project finance capacity. So more to come on that, but I wanted to just sort of mention it on this call. And then secondarily, we think that there's a lot more that our partners in philanthropy can be doing. So we intend to sort of explore the idea of bringing together a bigger set of conversations around national philanthropy in ways that it can more effectively and impactfully partner with local communities. That is the extent of the sort of paired stuff that I have. I had a couple of other things that I'd love to share, but I'd love to sort of see if there are questions or Chris, either from you or the NCST team, things that you think I could lean back in on. And then I want to, I think I mentioned the Milken Institute is one of our partners. I serve on their Public Finance Advisory Council. And I am going to put in the chat something relatively new. It's called the 10,000 Communities Initiative. I'm going to stop screen sharing. I'm going to get the website right so I don't give the wrong one. This is this 10K Communities Initiative is it's a bunch of national technical assistance providers, research entities like Lincoln and the Milken Institute. And 10K Communities is really about figuring out how we can accelerate community infrastructure projects around the country. The idea is this is an activity exercise. So I wanted to take advantage of an audience to say that we're trying to figure out to accelerate how we can help accelerate how we and the partners in the 10K Communities Initiative can accelerate and advance projects, critical community infrastructure projects around the country. And you'll see one of the things on here that I think is most useful is there is a submit your projects. So if NCST partners or participants on this call have project developers, project proponents who have something that they're trying to figure out in places that typically are less, this is, I'd say, parallel to some of the work that NLC and Bloomberg Philanthropies are doing on helping folks get ready to put applications in. This is more, how can we help you get ready to put applications in? And you'll see there's a whole list of partner providers who are offering free TA. There's people who are offering access to their curriculum. There's people who are offering access to their networks. I just wanted to include it as a sort of takeaway in addition to the presentation and the work at Lincoln. Because I know that everybody on this call is working with folks who are trying to get projects done all around the country. And this is a relatively new effort that we're involved with at Lincoln that I think might be, in this point, it's very low-fi, low-tech. Like when you submit a project, you'll get an email from somebody at Lincoln, but at some point, at Milken, at some point, this is going to be more of an online mapping, connecting sort of, I have this, this, and this, and here's who you should talk to sort of thing over time. But right now, it's just a form. It's just like a Google type form. You can fill in information about a project. So I wanted to share that as well. But I'd love to take questions about ACI. If there's interest in learning more, I'll put my information in the chat. I know my colleague Maya Hamburg, who's a research assistant on our team, is also in the audience here, so I'm going to put her email in here too.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. RJ, while you're doing that, let me just share, again, so thrilled to have had you join us today and, really speaking to what you've learned thus far over the last couple of years with the ACI campaign. I was really struck by, as you were describing it, how these conversations clearly led to, honest and deep dialogue, and that the success, if I'm hearing you right, really sounded, and it felt like that there were strong relationships, meaningful relationships that were built based on this work. I wonder if maybe a good place to start was there towards the end. You were speaking about this second COP effort. Can you talk a little bit more about, beyond those initial 11 states, what kind of what it is you'd be looking for in that second community of practice?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. We to be true to the initial sort of I would say that the qualitative sort of research methodology side of things, an active, interested public finance partner is a key first step for us. They don't necessarily need to be the person who makes the initial inquiry. That can be a community organization, that can be a development organization, that can be a more traditional government agency, that can be a CDFI, to be totally frank. It can be any number of but relatively quickly, because we think that there's sort of at least some value to starting with the municipal bond market and municipal sort of public finance tools. We're going to want to have, if not the person that raises the hand, a relatively early person around the table when we're looking at a new place. Needs to be an HFA, city, state, or regional, a development finance entity, city, state, or regional, a municipal government, that has bond issuing powers that it uses for community, that it uses beyond the sort of typical, we're going to issue bonds and we're going to build things and they're going to get purchased. Like, that's great. But there needs to be some appetite to think about ways to use public finance tools a little bit more creatively, nimbly, innovatively, pretty early on in a conversation. Doesn't need to always be the HFA or the DFA or the city, state, county, multi-jurisdictional equivalent. It can be another community partner or a project proponent or a traditional sort of government entity. But if there isn't a public finance appetite, relatively quickly, I guess my answer to the question is it can be anybody. Anybody can be first, but if it's not a public finance pool holder, we would want to try and find something like that in the local enabling construct pretty quickly. Because we think it's an interesting, we found it to be, I'm sure folks on this call have been in the position of working in government or government adjacent roles, and going and asking for a grant from a local foundation is oftentimes a hard bar to overcome when there are dozens of worthy, traditional, true nonprofit 501c3 needs in a community. It's tough for the government to come say we need a grant. A lot. The reason that we think it's important to have a public finance entity relatively near term to the initial conversation, if not leading the initial conversation, is because it dramatically changes the conversation with capital holders. When you can talk, we found that it dramatically changes the conversation with capital holders when you can talk to them about their fixed income asset allocation strategy and their endowment, and say, okay, you're a foundation that is interested in home ownership as a pathway to economic mobility, and you're local to community X. And we'll ask the question in a very gentle, collaborative, collegial way. Are you buying mortgage revenue paper that's being issued by the state HFA that's supporting the mortgages that you're saying are an important program priority for you? And if the answer is no, then we gently will ask why. Or say, would you be interested in with no drawdown on the grant budget yet, not to say that because once there's a relationship, then the additional dollars from the grant budgets, et cetera, so forth. There's nothing like being an investor partner to give somebody motivation to make a project or product work down the road if there's need for additional, more flexible concessionary capital. So we think that the investment first strategy is just an interesting one to pursue for public finance. So.
And certainly, again, it seems like you've been able to foster, a pretty healthy dynamic, through that discussion. I see at least one question here, but one other, I guess, related question comes from my mind, RJ, is with respect to the existing 11 communities, the existing 11 states, do you see sort of a next level with those? Is there more of the intersections like with the Consortium for Scenario Planning that maybe Lincoln Institute actually brings its own connections to?
Certainly. Yes, 2 additional connections to Lincoln into our centers or programs. We certainly have been able to do that already and have every intention of trying to continue to make both our research and our various practice or center-driven work available to the participants. The other sort of what's next thing for the initial 11 is, folks continue to sort of plug away at developing investable opportunities. As those come online, we'll ask those 3-part test questions to think about a local investor challenge. So we intend to continue to do the investor challenges with the pilot group, the inaugural group. We intend to continue to connect them to other resources in Lincoln and continue to be thought partners with the coalition of the willing that we've been able to establish here.
All right, so let's get to some questions that have come up in our Q&A. First off here from Kathy Kim, sure, it's excellent presentation, RJ. Thanks for your insights. Regarding the 10K communities, the 10,000 communities initiative, can you speak more to the eligibility and types of infrastructure projects for which this initiative was designed?
Absolutely. Hey, Kathy, thanks for the question. It's good to I can't see people on these webinars, but it's great to know that you're in the audience. Developers, as broadly as you can define that, cities, counties, states, nonprofits, community utilities. You can submit those local community projects into the platform, which will provide access to training materials, tools, partners, a ready peer network. As I said, you'll fill the form out, and the program team at Milken that is sort of leading it will begin to make some of those connections. We're also asking for subject matter experts for our peers in local and national economic infrastructure and housing development organizations to commit time and expertise to help underserved communities, typically disinvested communities, advance these projects. So it's really as wide a net as you possibly could conceive of in terms of project proponent type, but really focused on the kinds of places that do not typically have as easy, ready access to this type of peer network to help them develop projects. The other thing, as a partner to Milken on this, we are actively sort of seeking other organizations to sort of sign on as partners to both amplify the importance of direct support to underserved communities and to sort of build out the network of partners that you'll see on the website.
Great, thank you. Another question here, Wilford Bentley writes, will you be working with institutional investors and insurance companies? And I guess I'm presuming that that's with respect to the ACI initiative.
Yes, thanks for the question, Wilford. We have started to talk to insurance companies, and the individual accredited institutional investors question has been an interesting one. We've spent more time talking to their investment bankers and managers so far. That is not to say, I think it's a great question / suggestion, because it's been on my mind, is ways that we can talk to institutional investors, either on the public or private side, in addition to talking to their managers. That's one strategy, but talking to the actual depositors of said capital, as opposed to the banks that are managing those investment books, is something that we've probably in a one-off manner so far done, but definitely are considering more robustly talking to both those segments of the asset owner landscape.
Okay, excellent. I believe we've gotten through the entirety of our questions, unless there's any stragglers who want to chime in here on the Q&A. But if not, that's fine. Happy to give folks an extra 10 minutes here back in their day. RJ, I really want to thank you again. It was a pleasure having you on today's call. Really engaging and informative.
And again, if there's interest in more information, either about 10,000 communities, or frankly more directly, I mean, I'm happy to play the connector role on the former, and I'm happy to play the actual answer the question role on the latter when it comes to core Lincoln work or our work at ACI. So I guess I would say, my information and my colleague Maya's information, I dropped in the chat there. But if folks would prefer to not to put you and Raquel on the hook here for this piece of it, Chris, but if your usual audience of members that's been working with NCST all along and is participating in these calls, Chris and Raquel and the NCST team know where to find us too. So if it's easier for you to reach out to your existing contacts than it is to shoot a cold please shoot the cold email. We don't mind. But if you'd prefer to sort of be warm connected, not to put you all on the spot.
Not on the spot at all. We are equally happy to play the role of connector on that. Actually, it looks like we have gotten a couple more questions that have come up here. Daniel Keating writes, I've noticed that often the most quote unquote robust scenarios in urban planning are the ones that best serve the incumbent community. But the ones that receive the most excitement from city governments and developers are the ones that attract new people to the area. Have you noticed anything similar in your space?
That is a cogent and apt and spot on observation, Daniel. The new thing does tend to excite developers in particular, but we have found in some of the research that we've been doing, in particular on the capital holder side of sort of the research piece of the ACI initiative, for a certain type of capital holder, the incumbent community, the existing community, and ways to elevate the aspirations and outcomes for existing communities, frankly, tends to be more interesting to some of the capital holders. So we found that it's interesting. It's an interesting question, but we do think we have noticed it. We think there's an interest. We think there's at least the possibility of a workaround in that if you're digging in deep on attracting catalytic capital impact investor types, they're going to care about the former in your question enough that it might steer some of the thinking, help to. That's why this investor challenge model, where it's really about sort of learning together. That question comes up when a public finance entity and their partners are in the middle of designing a new product or program, or that perspective that you shared gets articulated by a capital holder. It can sometimes knock loose the over reliance on the new attraction mindset a little bit, right? If you hear from people that say, well, we'd be most interested if this was really if this thing or this project or this product were leaning in on naturally occurring local business growth, there's nothing like somebody who's potentially a potential investment partner saying we'd really prefer that you focus on the incumbent community or residents over attracting new folks, to help people sort of understand the question that you raise and adjust their thinking correspondingly.
There was an additional note to make sure that we circulated the contact information. I think there may have been an issue with
so I will drop it back in the chat for one. And then also my contact information is on the deck, Chris. So if you were going to send that out to attendees, it's in there too.
Excellent. It certainly will be.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can only send it to host and panelists.
Understood. But for our attendees, as RJ noted, there will be a follow-up email that's circulated, and also the presentation, RJ's contact information.
And my contact information is on the last slide of the presentation. So.
And
I'm on LinkedIn, and the lincolninst.edu is our website. So you can find me on there too.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, with that, again, a pleasure having you today.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity. Thrilled to be a partner and a member of the NCST family is just how we consider ourselves at this point. So we're excited to be a resource. And again, if I can answer questions about ACI, or if you see something on the website that seems interesting that I didn't talk about today that's applicable to your work, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to be a resource and partner to NCST and its members, and to any folks who happened to cross this talk and signed up who aren't already NCST members. But you should be if you're not, because this is a remarkable organization doing amazing work in communities all around the country. So,
well, thank you for that. Thanks also to all of our attendees. We will be back again next month. That call will feature a presentation on the Housing Supply Accelerator, which is a national campaign and partnership between the National League of Cities and the American Planning Association. So please plan to join that. As always, that call will be on the third Wednesday of the month, same time, 12:30 Eastern. So that'll be April the 19th. We'll see you then. So from all of us at NCST, have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.